Even though there are no official statistics in Russia during this war, we can use Google Trends to analyze how Russians actually reacted to war and how their lives have changed in the last 2 years. In 2021, more than 55% of Russian internet users were using Google search rather than Russian Yandex search. So I think that the data from Google Trends is relevant and we can use it to describe lots of important processes inside Russia. For example, if we check how often Russians were Googling Ukraine in 2021 and in the last 2 years, we'll see that the biggest spike of interest was in February of 2022 when the Russian invasion started, and also in September, October of 2022 when there was a mobilization in Russia. And right now the interest in Russia in what's happening in Ukraine and hence in the war is the lowest. It's like there is no actual war between Ukraine and Russia right now if you see these stats. Also, it's very interesting that the Russian regions closest to the border with Ukraine, such as Belgorod, Kursk, Smolensk and Voronezh, show the most interest in the war. But the most populated Russian region, which is Moscow, is in 25th place, which means that only a small percentage of people in Moscow cares about what's happening in Ukraine. Now let's see how often Russians Google when this war will end. As you can see, this request is getting more and more popular in Russia, and its peak was at the end of September, exactly 1 year after mobilization started in Russia. Also, this trend began exactly because of the mobilization in Russia. So I guess the trend we see most likely was created by relatives, wives, mothers and friends of mobilized soldiers. They just want to see their husbands, fathers and sons back home. And they didn't care much about what's happening in Ukraine and when this war will be over. They started to do so only when their men were taken to the war. Now let's check the immigration trend in Russia by analyzing Moscow, Turkey, Google search. As you can see, many Russians left for Turkey when the Russian invasion started. Then their number was gradually increasing and the big spike occurred during the mobilization last year. And then there was a smaller spike during Putin's annual address to public. So he said something that made Russian people want to leave Russia. Probably as usual it was some kind of nonsense that made Russians lose their hope in the quick end of this unprovoked war. Also, there was an increase in immigration at the end of this summer, probably related to rumors of the new mobilization in Russia. Okay, and how about Russia's dream to produce its own goods so Russians wouldn't be interested in iPhones and all that stuff? According to the trend you see, somehow Russians were even more interested in buying iPhone when the invasion started. They have not lost any interest in it at all. So no, Russians don't want to live isolated from world's goods. By the way, why Chechnya, Ingushetia and Dagestan show the most interest in iPhones? Maybe you know something that I don't know, please mention in the comments below this video. We all remember that Russia wanted to cooperate with China more, and that's exactly what happened according to the trend you see on the screen right now. Russians are very interested in getting visas to China. Mostly this interest in the regions closest to the Chinese borders. So I guess many Russians are building businesses with China, and also they are just looking for working visas to find better paying jobs in China. Now, very important moment, let's see whether the war made Russian population more patriotic. Let's start with the Russian anthem. As you can see, Russians started to Google it much more often during the war. For some reason there was an increased interest in spring of 2022 and during the mobilization in Russia. It's like Russians were trying to hype themselves up before they went to war. It's interesting that the most interest in the Russian anthem showed the regions where there is the smallest percentage of Russian population, such as Kalmykia, Cherkessia, Tuva, Buryatia, etc. It's people from those regions who struggled the most because of Putin's imperialistic ambitions. And that's really weird, you know. The good thing though is that there are still those in Russia who support Ukraine. The red chart you see on the screen is for the Ukrainian flag, while the blue is for the Russian one. As you can see, the red trend almost crossed the blue one here. Could it mean that Russians now want Ukraine to win more than they want Russia to win or end this war? I don't know, guys. I feel like there is still hope. Imagine that at least a third part of the Russian population secretly supports Ukraine. And it's dangerous for them, actually. And the reason for that is probably that Russians understand that if Ukraine doesn't win this war before the presidential elections in Russia, then they'll be left with no hope in hands of cold, brutal and bloodthirsty dictator. By the way, it seems many Russians are waiting for his natural death, since they started to check his age more oftenly. They especially wanted his death when he invaded Ukraine and announced partial mobilization in Russia. So generally things aren't looking that bad. Even Russians are tired of that old madman. Hopefully you found this video interesting. Personally, I enjoyed making it. Please support my channel with like, subscription and comment. Thank you for this. I'll see you soon and goodbye to you all.